Isle of Wight Volunteer Stories is a podcast brought to you by the Isle of Wight Volunteer Centre, celebrating the wonderful contribution that volunteers make to island life. We'll be hearing about the different roles and activities that people do, what they get out of it, and what motivates them to start in the first place. Volunteers share some of the highs and lows of their lives, talk about the skills that they learn and the connections that they make on their volunteer journey. We hope this podcast will give you an insight into a world you may not be familiar with, will demonstrate that volunteers come from all walks of life, and perhaps it will inspire you to start your own volunteer story. I'm Sandy Cicognani from Community Action Isle of Wight, and I'll be your host on this podcast. In this episode, I talk to Chris Bacon, a volunteer for Embracing Age on the Isle of Wight. He started as a volunteer befriender and has since taken on additional roles, including events and fundraising. Chris talks about what it's like to go into a care home and to talk to somebody with dementia. With a background in sales, Chris is a really good storyteller, and I found him really easy to listen to, so I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I enjoyed listening to him. So today I'm in the grounds of St Blasius Church in Shanklin, and I'm meeting Chris Bacon, who is a volunteer for Embracing Age. Chris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, yes, I am indeed a volunteer for Embracing Age. I think one of the earlier ones on the Isle of Wight, actually.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when did you start, and what prompted you to first get in touch?
Okay, so I went to the Volunteers Fair in January 20, and there I met Barbara, who had a small stand. Now, interestingly, the heading over the stand there was not Embracing Age, but Care Home Friends, and those words immediately sort of resonated with me. So I had a chat with Barbara, and that got me even more interested. It just sounded different. And maybe there was something about that difference that I liked. I went to a home twice within a couple of weeks of having had training with the charity, and then of course it was locked down, the homes all shut, and it wasn't until whenever it was now that we began to be able to do what we're now doing, which is visiting people.
Can you tell me, when you first went into the care home, what was the reaction you got from the residents there?
Well, this was interesting because the woman who runs it said nobody here really wants a visitor. She'd obviously asked and told them that I was coming. And one woman who was sat diagonal, so I sat in the lounge, and I was looking, there were probably 8 or 10 people in the lounge sat there, all dead quiet, no conversation, no nothing. And there was one woman who looked directly into my eyes from a distance, and she was obviously, I gleaned, she was sharp as a razor, fully compos mentis, and she was sizing me up. Why am I here? What am I doing? But she never said a word. The man opposite got a little bit belligerent because he really couldn't understand what the hell I was doing there or why I was doing it. And what I told him really didn't seem to make much sense to him. But other than that, not much happened. On the second visit, the lady that I thought was fully compos mentis did start having a chat with me, and she was sharp as a razor, as I thought. But other than that, I just sat there. And then lockdown came, and I haven't been back to that home since. I serve the charity in lots of other ways. I'm now on the funding committee that determines policy and how we get funding. So I'm very active in the charity, other than visiting people in a care home.
I was going to say, and I've seen you at a number of events as well, haven't I?
Yeah, that's it. So, I get involved, and I made the point right from the word go that I was interested to do that. So we have meetings regularly, and there have been various events that I've attended as part of the charity, and I thoroughly enjoy the doing of that. That's a totally different aspect to the meeting and so on in a care home. But from my point of view, it gives me a lot more variety. And now the charity as a whole is a very interesting part of my life, yeah. So then, I can't remember how long ago, it's a goodly while, they said there was a lady in another home in Sandown who they'd spoken to the lady who ran the home and thought that she would benefit. So I went to meet her, and she could talk for England. So it was just like today, it was a beautiful sunny day then, so we sat out in the garden. She's mid-90s. I would say she has mild dementia, and she told me all about her father. She did virtually all the talking on that first visit. And her father was obviously an important part of her life and her adult life, in that he was a businessman, and this lady had also been quite a powerful businesswoman, I sussed. So I did most of the listening then. I know I got into a conversation with me talking towards the end, but I can't remember what it was about. But since then, it's been a rather surreal situation. She lives in the past. Although she's suffering from mild dementia, the past is very real to her, her business life primarily, nothing to do with family. And she at some point took it for granted that she and I had been together in business.
Right.
And fine, I went along with that, no problem. So ever since then, we've had these, what I call surreal conversations, where she'll talk about normally a problem or something that had gone wrong, business-wise, and I would then chip in and suggest how she might have thought differently about what she'd said and subsequently done. What I was doing, I would come in with prompts every now and then to trigger her into a slightly different way of thinking to what she had been thinking when she was describing this scenario. And that's the way it's gone ever since. And at some point, normally somewhere between half an hour and an hour, she'll say, well, it's been lovely for you to come and visit me again. I've really enjoyed it. And I know that's a cue that she's had enough, so I'll say my goodbyes and go. And somehow this has gone on and on and on. And I've been to see her most weeks. It's only the odd occasion I've not been able to go. And somehow we've got into a quite deep conversation each time. I mean, on average, I'm probably 40 minutes there. And I'm going back 3 or 4 months ago. We were halfway through a conversation and she burst into tears. So I grabbed hold of her hand and squeezed it and said, "What's wrong?" I should say at this point, quite often over the past 6 months, she's been not just in her bedroom, but in bed. So I pull up the chair next to the bed and I'm sat next to her bed talking to her. And she was in bed this time. And I grabbed hold of her hand, and all of a sudden she threw her arms round me and said, "I really do appreciate you coming and talking to me." Oh, flipping heck, you got me right there. And I think somehow I've lifted her up in some way by keeping those memories alive. She's still living in the past. She does not live in the present. I don't think she knows she's in a care home. Several times I've said, "I'll see you next week," and she'll say, "If I'm still here." I think she thinks she might be in a hospital for some reason, and at some point she'll be released. So again, I've not tried to disillusion that or change it. But somehow, by having these conversations, it keeps them alive, I think, in her memory, which I think lifts her out of the mundanity of sitting in that care home, maybe talking to nobody most of the time. Because on all the occasions I've gone to visit, there's a big lounge at the front with maybe 8 or 10, 12 residents sat there. She's never once been there. There's a small lounge at the back which might hold 1 or 2 or 3 residents, and quite often none, and that's where she sits. And then if the weather's good, she'll sit in the garden. So she obviously doesn't communicate much with the other residents. So I think the conversations that we have together at least give her something, because my guess is that when I leave, she's mulling over what we've said, because I've quite often triggered serious thought in some of the comments I've made about, "Oh, you could have handled that like this, or you could have handled, or did you not think of doing this?" And I do that deliberately to make her think. And she's a very intelligent woman, despite the dementia. So I think in some weird way, these conversations do give her a boost, which is rather nice, you know.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, did you need training to do that? I don't know if would everybody be able to do the sort of thing that you're doing?
No, would be the short answer. Obviously, we had a morning's training with the charity, but, and it's a big but, I've spent my whole life in sales, so my life has been spent talking to people, primarily selling a product, but equally I've done lots of talks to groups of people on the products that I've specialised in work-wise. So I suppose I've spent a lot of my life talking, answering questions, making people understand what it is I'm about and where I'm coming from and what I'm selling. So I think in that respect, the working life that I've had, when it comes to a scenario like this, I think that's
really helped you.
It's really made it easy for me in a way, because you could almost say she's another person that I'm talking to. The fact that what we talk about now is nothing like I've ever talked about before is almost by the by.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking, and she's an interesting character. And most of my life I've been blessed to deal with interesting characters. I've been in the photographic trade. I I've been a keen photographer all my life. So my whole life I've been talking to people on a subject that is very dear to me. So I've been blessed there. But talking with this woman again, it's on subjects that were very dear to her. So I could appreciate that, and I think adjust where I was coming from accordingly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, perfectly. Yeah. And I know you've already sort of mentioned it partially, but can you say something about what it is exactly that you get out of this volunteering?
That's not an easy one to answer. I suppose really, if I'm honest, it's again interacting with people. I mean, I retired at the grand age of 76 back in 2020, so I've had a very long working life. Had it not been for the pandemic, I probably would have still been working. Work has not only been a means of earning money for me, but I've been blessed to love what I've done. And obviously, being in sales all my life means I've been talking to people. So, talking in the way that I have been here, again, lifts me out of my normal day-to-day life. And I think that's now that I'm saying those words, that's what I get out of it. It takes me out of, because now I've retired, especially with lockdown where we couldn't do anything or go anywhere and so on. So the past few years have been, compared to my working life, have been very limited in what I do and who I interact with and so on. So this is a different bit of interaction, which in a way reminds me of what I used to do work-wise. I think that would probably be the answer.
Thank you, that's great. Is there anything else you'd like to say about volunteering or to other people that are maybe considering it?
Okay, now, just out of interest, another facet of embracing age is care home friends, which is what visiting the people's about. But another part of care home friends is that every month we send cards of kindness, which is what they're called, to people in care homes. So we're not visiting these people. I deal with 2 different care homes to the one I go to see in this instance. One in Sandown, one in Blackwater. And every month I sit down, we have a load of volunteers all over the island who make cards, beautiful handmade cards, beautifully decorated. Some of them take your breath away. And I've got all the names of the people that I'm writing to, Bill, Charlie, Mavis, you name it. So I will sit down and write out, hello Mavis, isn't it nice that we're now into summer and the weather's been beautiful recently? Each card will have a personal message from me and the other volunteers to the recipient of the card. One of the homes I deliver about 18 cards, so that's 18 residents every month are getting a card. The other home is 8 cards. It was about 12, but obviously people pass away and so on. So this happens every month. And recently, from one home that I deliver the cards to, I've had several comments to say how much the people, the residents, appreciate reading those cards. And again, you think, what a good idea. And how lovely that there are all these volunteers who sit and craft these stunningly beautiful goods. Some of them take your breath away, they're so beautiful. So again, it's another facet of this charity that makes me think how good it is, in that every month this happens. And now over the island, I think we're dealing with 40, late 40s, 47, 48 care homes who get cards every month like this. And again, you think, so other than just the people who get visited, there's an awful lot of people across the island who are being communicated with every month via the cards of kindness. And again, wow.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? I mean, on this, we're hoping to sort of, not just talk about the positives, and you touched on something just there about the fact that obviously some residents do pass away. Is there anything that you would like to say about that? Or, again, is it something that might put somebody off?
I suppose it's a fact of life, isn't it? I would say every other month, maybe every 2 or 3 months, I'll get a note from the woman who runs the cards of kindness bit to say this name or this name is no longer at the home, they've passed away. And it's always sad. But then I suppose all these people are, most of them, very old. I mean, my experience is they are very old. There aren't any 60-year-olds on average. They're late 80s, 90s, etc. And when I get that, it always gets you there a bit because it is sad. But then I think, how must the people in the homes be affected where they've got to know those people? And maybe they've spent a few years knowing them and got on well with them. And suddenly, so from my point of view, it is sad. But then I think, wow, what about those carers who've looked after those people? And I suppose, therefore, by comparison, although I feel sad when I get these notifications, I just think how strong those carers must be, because this is a part of their life, isn't it?
Yeah.
That they're getting this on a regular basis. And you just think, thank God for beautiful people like that.
Yeah. Excellent, thank you. I think we should end on a positive note as well. Any other further thoughts that you'd like to say?
No, I go to the Volunteers Fair every year. My wife is also looking for a volunteering role, but hasn't found something she's interested in yet. She did, for about 6 or 8 months, do a volunteering job, but really didn't work out particularly well. I find it very rewarding, I find it very satisfying, and certainly if you've retired, it gives you something else to spend useful time on, which is rewarding and satisfying. So if you are thinking of volunteering, I would say pursue the thought, certainly go to the Volunteers Fair when it's on, but also look at what's out there. My experience of working with Embracing Age is that all the homes and the residents that we deal with do appreciate what we do, and I know they work with various other charities as well. So whatever you do will be much appreciated, and I think even that is it would give you a satisfaction in the doing of it.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. Thanks for coming on the podcast, and thank you for being a volunteer.
A pleasure. Thank you.
If you would like to find out more about how to volunteer, or if you're an organisation looking for volunteers on the Isle of Wight, please go to our website www.iwvolunteer.org or email us on volunteer@actioniw.org.uk.